Good morning. So, many of you probably have beloved memories of your grandpa, but for me, that just wasn't how life was. My grandpa was not a very loving person. He was a veteran and a retired Army drill instructor. And we all know it takes a certain kind of person to want to be an Army drill instructor who's willing to dish out all kinds of abuse in a directed and sustained effort. He had PTSD so bad that I remember times driving down the road with him where he would have a break from reality and he would start saying stuff like, "Charlie's in the trees, red team go," all kinds of stuff like that. He had to stop the car and chase him down the side of the road. So he eventually lost his license. You can't do that too many times before you have huge problems. He also was a raging alcoholic and diabetic, which is a really ugly mix. I watched him drink away one of his legs and then drink away his other leg. And then the doctors tell him that if he didn't stop drinking, he would die. And so then he got clean and sober and was really mad about it. Really mad about not having legs. Really mad about being disabled. And, one day, when my grandpa came to stay with us for a while after he lost both of his legs and was going through that, I had a friend come to the door, and my friend's name was Reuben. He was a really sweet kid, one of the nicest kids I knew growing up. But my grandpa had this dog named Boots, who was a boxer. It was a beautiful dog, and seemed like a pretty nice dog until my friend Reuben came to the door. And never seen a dog try to break down a door before, or jump up to the window, trying to get at my friend. And I was really confused by what was going on. Well, my friend Reuben was half black and half Mexican. And my grandpa was very racist and had somehow even trained his dog to be racist. You know, and as I asked my grandpa about this racism, I didn't understand and why someone would hate someone based not on what they did even, but on just who they are. He told me this weird conspiracy stuff about this. He believed this coming World War III would be this big race war. He had this whole end time scenario about it. It's just like, I remember thinking when I was a young kid, what is wrong with the world? Something like this would happen. Later, I was a Yankee from Washington State, ended up moving to the South. And they didn't know what to do with a long-haired rocker kid like me. Obviously, my haircut has changed. I remember people coming up to me and saying, "Y'all talk funny." And I remember wanting to say so badly sometimes, "You should hear it on this end, pal." And I found myself in this little town with the bayou that ran through the middle of it, and the black people lived on one side and the white people lived on the other. And nearly every day at school there was a big rumble between the black kids and the white kids. It just took a little spark to bring about this giant fight. And I was often invited in to become a part of this rumble. And I just, I fought a lot when I was a kid, but I just couldn't fight for something that stupid. And so I was, it was the first time in my life I experienced racism myself, because black kids would hate me because I was white, because they had experienced that and passed it on to me. I was the only white kid in some of my classes, and it's just a completely different world than I had ever known. Later on, I ended up moving that was Tallulah, Louisiana, ended up moving to where we worked, at Vicksburg, Mississippi, which was a couple miles down the road. Me and my mom worked there, and our boss was seemed like a really nice lady. She really liked us, and she was willing to let us move in with her so we could get a place there in Vicksburg. And a couple weeks into our move, we put up family photos, and I have a black cousin. And turns out this lady was a member of the KKK. And her head basically spun around like The Exorcist. And she put all her stuff out on the street. And she got me fired from my job. And she did everything she could to get my mom fired from her job. It's easy for us sometimes to forget that the world is filled with these divisions, these broken divisions, and some of them are along really ridiculous lines. Before Ferguson happened, it's been in the news lately, we might have been tempted, some of us, to think, well, gosh, it's 2014, But with Ferguson, you can see that the sin of racism can escalate things. It can spark that fight back up that people have, division among themselves. Many of us are blissfully ignorant of the white privilege that we have, how it affects us. We're blissfully ignorant and naive about the way that we as men, when we speak up in a meeting, we're listened to. But when a woman would speak up in that meeting, say even the same things that we've said, she's often ignored. We're blissfully ignorant of how many doors our education opens up for us, that many people don't enjoy those advantages. And as a white male working on a master's degree, it's really easy for me to see the world that way, because in many ways, the world is my oyster. I have every advantage that I can have. But it took a lot for me to crawl out of poverty on the road to addiction and self-destruction and all the obstacles I faced along the way. There are people out there who face greater obstacles even that I faced. So Paul, in describing the work that Jesus did to reconcile us to God, he doesn't just stop there. He goes on to describe how that reconciliation works itself out amongst us as God's people. He points out that the next steps to the path of reconciliation is the healing of all human divisions, these man-made lines that we draw. We like to separate ourselves out. God has nothing like that in his plan. The family of God is supposed to be an undivided family. So in Jesus, he says that our faith has come. The faith we share in this work Jesus did will end all those broken systems of isolation and segregation and legalism that came before. Now we must simply choose to live into that reality, to find it in our own lives, and to live in the truth of that. So we have been working through the Quaker testimonies, and this is the final one. It's the testimony of equality. And so as I talk about this radical vision of equality that God has for us, I also want to talk about some of how our spiritual descendants as Quakers of old try to live some of these things out. Friends have long held the belief that there is that of God in everyone. And, often theologians talk about the Imago Dei, which is a fancy way of saying that we are created in the image of God and we reflect that image, and so we're all equal before God. But Quakers really took that idea further. They took it to the point where meaning that God was at work in the lives of every person. Even if they didn't understand it, even if they weren't paying attention to it, even if they didn't realize it, that God is still working through everyone, regardless of how evil they might seem, regardless of who they are. And so God sees us as his children in need. We're first and foremost to think of ourselves as children of God. While some of our human parents may have shown favoritism, and maybe some of us have really competitive relationships with our brothers and sisters, we all know that God doesn't see us that way. Our relationship with God is not based on our merit. It's not based on what we do or what we produce. It's not based on who we are. It's based on who we are in Christ. In the early church, one of the biggest reconciliations that happened was the division between the Jew and the Gentile. It was a giant chasm to be overcome, and you can see this in Scripture spilling out in various ways. In fact, much of the New Testament was written to address this issue. There's a messy struggle there, and it's hard for us to relate to because basically we're all Gentiles now. We don't see it that way. We forget sometimes that becoming children of Abraham and being grafted in as heirs of this promise is something that was hard for people who were already at the table to accept. The simple fact that we're even talking about that thing in past tense is proof of the power of God to reconcile the church. And next, Paul goes on to point out that the divisions of class between slaves and free people, this is another thing that's really hard for us to get our heads around because we don't have slaves. There are all kinds of classes between slave and free and rich people and poor people that are overcome in the love that God has for the church. But we don't have slavery in America, and basically we don't have slavery in America because our spiritual descendants got their hands dirty and did something about it. You couldn't stand that idea of a family of God being divided along such petty lines like the color of our skin. And so Quakers had abolished slavery among themselves some 80 years before the rest of America caught up. John Woolman, for instance, went out and traveled the world trying to convince all the Quakers of his time that the sin of slavery was evil, that it had its roots in oppression, and that we should get out of that business as a people, as a church. Other early Quaker abolitionists like Sarah and Angelina Grimke were these wonderful Southern women who argued eloquently from the Bible for the inclusion of slaves and former slaves into the life that God has in the church, and also for women, for the inclusion of women, and the beginning of women's suffrage and women's rights. And many Quakers, even Quakers right here in Iowa, were part of the Underground Railroad, bringing runaway slaves into places that they could find safety and security. I have yet to go visit some of those places, and don't really have that sort of thing back in the Northwest. But I would love to go check it out and see these houses and things as part of history of people who believed it so strong that they're willing to risk so much to see it live down. So, lastly, Paul talks about the divisions between male and female. And one of the parts of our Quaker heritage that's really controversial even today is the idea that we believe so strongly in the priesthood of all believers that we have a place at the table for women to lead and teach and preach and even serve as ministers. Margaret Fell and many other early Quaker women paved the way for this by preaching and writing and meeting the challenges of their day with a loving answer to those who criticized them. And so this was considered very controversial 400 years ago, 300 years ago. Mary Dyer, for instance, was hung at Boston Commons for preaching in public. That's when Quakers were believing this, and it was so hard. It wasn't just a cushy world like ours where people might think, oh, well, you have a disagreement about women in ministry. No worries. So friends took this verse from Galatians at face value, not limiting it just to our relationship with God like many people want to sweep that second part under the rug, but moving towards God's inclusive vision of a church united as one. So we're all one in Christ, Paul says. We are all created in the image of God, and the ground truly is level at the foot of the cross. So what does that mean to us as a church? What does that mean to us today here at College Avenue Friends in Oskaloosa, Iowa? How can we live into that reality of being reconciled to God? And how can we look at the primary ways of being reconciled with God as an attempt to reconcile our relationships with each other? I think Paul suggests 3 ways. The first is to recognize the blinders we have as spiritual insiders. You know, that struggle between the Gentile and the Jew is one of spiritual insiders and spiritual outsiders. And it's easy for us as we meet people who don't come from our background, they don't have that relationship with God, to really walk in a sort of arrogance because we feel like we have the truth and they don't. And it gives us an advantage. So at times we're called to lay that down and just meet them where they're at and share openly with them about our relationship with God, but not in a way that's condescending, but in a way that really speaks to their condition. So if Jews can really be reconciled to the Gentiles, then obviously we can do that. God can do that in our heart. We don't have to go give people spiritual ultimatums about how they can turn or burn, or give them ultimatums about following Jesus if they're really not ready to receive. Second, we can put to death the arrogance of class. Many of us are educated, privileged, and comfortable. We see the world as our oyster rather than thinking of others who are just struggling to get by. We should do everything in our power to lift up those people who are trying to find their way. For instance, if you know a minority student at Penn who's looking for a job, don't just tell them about jobs that you hear. Be willing to vouch for them. Be willing to go with them and help them find their place. Talked to a guy at the park who came a while back, and he was a black man trying to find a job in this town. He went every single place he could think of, and he could not find a job in this town.
So what can we do about that sort of thing, College Avenue? It's easy to let the fact that we're a majority, let it be an excuse to railroad others and bump them out of our way so that we can have everything the way that we would like it. We have to look at that and to check our hearts as we let those kind of preferences and things work out in the church. We have to let God's grace meet us as we stretch beyond. Third, we men and women should put to death the ignorance and the arrogance of the battle of the sexes. We shouldn't be petty with each other. We should listen to each other. And men especially, I think, need to try and listen to women better than they do. Not that women are completely off scot-free with everything with that, but it's so easy for us to take advantage of the privilege of our position and the authority that people give us as men, and we have to lay that down. We have to be respectful of the fact that we're equal before God and equal before each other. And so it's not easy to see these things or talk about these things, but these are huge obstacles to us being one church, to us being united in Christ together as one. So I did a project on the Grimke sisters. I did the project because I'd never heard of them. They weren't Quaker women that I had heard of, and it was in a class at Fox, and they were really unsung heroes of the abolition movement and really pioneers of women's rights in like the 1830s. They were abolitionists before it was cool. And they were actually kicked out of their meeting because they were stirring up controversy. They lived in the antebellum South before the war, and they tried to argue for the inclusivity of black people and slaves and abolish slavery. And then as they did that, they found themselves being confronted because they were women. And they found themselves having to argue and defend the fact that they were even talking in public because they were women. And so this propelled them into feminism. This propelled them into defending the rights of women too. And so they argued on eloquent biblical grounds for passages like the one we read today, for the inclusion of all people, whatever color, and argued against the discrimination at the roots of slavery. And so as Southerners, they were able to speak into their time and culture in a way that people who didn't live there and didn't know it could not. And they found themselves constantly under attack by people who wanted to disqualify them and silence them and shut them out. And I read a lot of their works, and they're just beautiful. I wish feminists today would use the same sorts of reasoning and language that they did in their time, instead of bashing people. They just really generous and kind, and they just kind of tried to take them along, looking at the Bible and their experience. Because I want to read to you a quote from Sarah Grimke in her work, Women Subject Only to God, and as well as a free verse poem that I wrote that's based on this quote. So here's the quote, written in 1830. It sounds a little different than we talk today. Here's the quote. Even admitting that Eve was the greater sinner, it seems to me man might be satisfied with the dominion he has claimed and exercised for nearly 6,000 years, and that more true nobility would be manifested by endeavoring to raise the fallen and invigorate the weak, than by keeping women in subjection. But I ask no favors for my sex. I surrender not our claim to equality, and permit us to stand upright on that ground which God designed us to occupy. If he has not given us the rights which have, as I conceive, been wrested from us, we shall soon give evidence of our inferiority and shrink back into obscurity, which the high-souled magnanimity of man has assigned us as our appropriate sphere. So as I read this quote and did this project, I felt moved to write this poem that I'll share with you now. It's kind of a free verse thing, but it follows some of the archaic language that she used. So here's the poem. I named it Among Equals. Formality's gloss and charm cannot mask oppression's lash, despite falling by silk-wrapped hand. Is charm-wrapped safety offered for women, or as protection from what they might ask? Love asks not cheap favor, but a firm place to stand. Sex blurs among Christ's earthly body, knit whole as love flattens false order arranged at fear's peck. Women silenced and led by bridal bit's pull must speak freedom in truth with untrodden neck. In Christ, sex is one of the many facets of love expressed by heart, mind, and will alongside strength. May God log eyes measuring and pleasuring the shape as sole asset, for women are not thoughtless flowers cut to length like decorations. Among equals, sex fades as mind meets mind and heart heart. Despite dark or light skin, despite genital part, permit us stand. A while back, when we were going through the book of Colossians, we came to a very similar passage as this, and I asked the question, why is it that there aren't any black people here in church or other minorities here in church? And William Penn University is full of all kinds of diversity. How are we to be hospitable to that diversity rather than just doing the will of the majority? How might black students from the inner city or international students come to find their place among us? How can we bend to receive them? Martin Luther King Jr. once said that Sunday morning has the most segregated hour in America. And I think things haven't changed all that much. But what is it that we are going to do about that? What are we going to do to help the church be like that church in Revelation of many people of all color and voice and race singing together to God, glorifying His name? We're going to have to wait till that time to get to a situation like that. We're just going to let our preferences rule. We have the humility to lay those things down. This power that's falsely assumed by being the majority, and make room at the table for the outsider. So many of you received a little card this morning as you came in to worship. And if you haven't had one, I would ask that you maybe stand and one of the ushers would bring them to you. What I want to do with this card is to write your name on one side and your phone number if you're comfortable doing that. And then all I want you to do is find the person in this room that seems the most different from you. If you're an old person, find a young person if you can. If you're a male, find a female. If you're from a certain class, find someone from a different class. And I want you to exchange that card with them. And this week, as you go through the week, I want you to carry that card with you and pray for them. And one time this week, call them up and try to find some common ground. So go ahead and stand and find someone who's different from you. And then we'll go into our time of worship. And as you go into that time of worship, start out that time by praying for this person that God is putting in